I spent the entirety of my last summer drawing a book about visiting your grandparents as a child. All of my grandparents are already gone, and I miss them. I just wasn't ready to leave that world of endless love and care and worry about whether I've had enough to eat. So I came back to it through art. But this is not just for me. I dedicated this whole book to everyone who misses their grandparents. I really believe that if your grandparents were from a Slavic country, and especially if they were Czech, Slovak, or Polish, and lived in the village, that you'll find something in this video that will remind you of your childhood. And therefore, you'll be able to go back to that magical world for just a minute. In case this is your first time watching any of my videos, hi. My name is Lucie and I'm a Czech artist who is heavily inspired by Slavic customs, mythology, and traditions in my art. And this is probably the biggest personal project I've ever done in my illustration career. And in this video, I'll walk you through how I made this book. I'll show you how I illustrated the pages, tell you a bit about the story and the memories so that we can go back to our childhoods for a bit and reminisce about our grandparents together. The book starts with a letter from the grandparents to the grandchild, inviting her to spend her summer holidays at their house. So please let this video be a letter from me to you, inviting you to spend some time along with them. The first question that needs to be answered is, why? Why did I decide to draw a whole book? That's a lot of work for feeling a bit nostalgic. I got the first idea for it in 2024 when my grandma's health was getting worse. She was my last living grandparent, and knowing that she might be gone soon overwhelmed me. Mentally, she hasn't been herself for a few years. She didn't know who I was, but still, I was sitting there looking at this woman who played games with me, who encouraged me to draw and would give me her precious papers that she would save for special occasions, just so that I can draw on them. The person who was trying to explain the world to me through these Christian parables, which didn't really land with me because I ended up being an atheist, but still, I appreciated that. And the thought of her suddenly being gone was a lot. Seeing her felt like that childhood part of me still exists. And knowing that she would pass soon meant that my childhood would be truly over. And then she indeed passed away. And so it was even more significant to make all of this. Because this book is my little form of saying goodbye. A little homage to all of my grandparents and all of the grandparents in the world, and the love and care and joy they put into their grandchildren's worlds and lives. But did I base the characters that are in this book on my own grandparents? No, not really. I wanted it to be relatable to more people, so I created specific characters for the book. But I definitely did draw inspiration from my memories of my grandparents. There's a part where the grandpa tells the grandchild a scary story, and that's what my other grandma used to do. She would tell me these amazing scary stories, and yes, I would be afraid, but she was there with me, so it was fine, and I loved them. I loved listening to them. I already said that the book starts with a letter that was inspired by the grandma I talked about a bit earlier. She wrote these heartfelt letters that were written in the most beautiful cursive ever, and I still kept them all. I have them in a little golden envelope. My grandpa would always worry whether I've had enough to eat, so I included a whole section about food. But other than that, I made the characters their own people. Grandma is a bit reserved. She likes things to be in order, and she remembers everything. She always makes sure you've had enough to eat, and you can always count on her to be there for you. Grandpa, on the other hand, is a cheerful jokester who often gets lost in his thoughts. He loves to take care of his plants and spends a lot of time in the garden. He tells the best stories full of twists and strange mythical creatures. Grandma grounds Grandpa, and he helps her to loosen up. Grandma is an introvert who likes to follow rules, and Grandpa brings a bit of chaos into their lives. They both adore their grandchild very, very much, but they both show it in a different way. And speaking of the grandchild, I also didn't want to base her on me, so I created the character of Anička. She's an adventurous soul with big imagination who loves to create stories, which I think she got from her grandpa. So the thing was that I had this vague idea of what I want to do. I knew which memories I would like to include and sort of knew how I would like to portray them, and I knew what the characters would be. However, a book usually needs a concept or a story or something that holds all of those pieces together. So I decided that the concept would be that you're seeing everything through the eyes of the child, Anička. So when you're reading this book, there's little texts that explain what is happening, and that is written from the point of view of Anička. So you're actually reading her diary. You're experiencing the memories and the little moments in the day through her eyes. So the main gist of it is that Anička gets a letter from her grandparents. She goes on the train to get to their house and spends the holiday there. And then you have these little moments and fragments of how she spends her time with them. Those moments might seem mundane to an adult, but they're super magical to a child. I really got into the world building. And when I say really, I mean really got into it. You see, there's lore. There's actual lore. I created a whole village where the grandparents live, and there's everything you need. There's the train station Anička arrives at, bus stop, a pub, a shop. I even made up stories about the neighbors who aren't even in the story, but I know everything about them. And yes, I made a whole map for it, so you can actually see how to get from the train station to the grandparents' house. And all of these informations I made up about this little village live rent-free in my head. They weren't really necessary for the story, but I still made them up because I got so into it. That's not all though. So the grandparents have a house, right? And I based it on houses you would see around the village over here, or like in Slovakia, in Slavic countries basically. I'm sure you've seen a house like this if you come from a Slavic village. However, I decided to draw a whole floor plan for the house. And it's not just a floor plan. I actually measured it so that it makes sense. And technically, you could build a house according to it, though I wouldn't try that because I'm not an architect and it would probably fall apart. But the measurements are to scale. I actually ran around the house and measured how big the toilet is in regards to the walls and windows and drawers and everything. So I really am dedicated like that, okay? I really got into this. I also came up with the whole family dynamic, and there's a little photo of Anička's parents. That's also not important to the story at all, but it's there because I wanted it to be there. It's like a little tiny extra thing. So when I say that this project took over months of my life, I think you might believe that. So, though this book doesn't have like this huge story that would win a Pulitzer Prize, it's just little fun moments told through the child's eyes. We will talk about that diary bit a bit later because that's also very funny, and I made it way harder for myself than I probably should have, but it's for later. Firstly, I would like to tell you something about some of the memories I included so that you get a better idea. For example, the garden. You see, when I visited my grandparents' garden in the village when I was a child, it was huge. It seemed to stretch far away, and there were so many little corners and nooks that were waiting to be explored by me. And the trees were so high up, but I still fearlessly climbed them anyway. And then when I visited it when I was a bit older, it was just a regular garden. It wasn't big, and the trees were fairly small. So seeing it through the adult eyes made it lose its magic, which is really sad. But what's even sadder is that along with that magic, I seem to have lost my courage. As I said, like, I would climb trees when I was a child. I would climb a lot of things when I was a child. So I wanted to include a little scene of Anička climbing a tree while picking cherries. However, I needed a reference because that angle is quite strange. So I decided I would take one on my parents' cherry tree in their garden. I didn't dare to climb it, even though it's fairly climbable, but I fearlessly got onto our tiny ladder and climbed the 3 steps up there, even though I was starting to get a bit dizzy on step 2. As I was getting ready to take my picture and get the hell out of there, something landed in my hair, something big. So immediately I panic. What is it? A beetle, a spider. Oh my god, it's gonna crawl under my shirt and I'm gonna die probably. So I frantically get out of the ladder and start shaking vigorously to get that thing off of me. Do you know what it was? A cherry. A freaking cherry. My child self would probably laugh at me. But children don't really see the dangers of anything. They're fearless because they feel like they're invincible. So I made grandma the voice of reason there, and she's kind of like scolding Anička for climbing the tree because she's worried about her. She loves her very much and she doesn't want her to get hurt. But to Anička, she's just ruining the fun, you know. Though I feel like even the grandma character would laugh at me if I told her that I was scared of a cherry on a cherry tree. But let's move on from my embarrassing antics and talk about another very staple thing of every grandparent's visit: food. Whose grandparents were never worried whether their grandchild had enough to eat? I feel like Slavic grandmas are especially masters at making you eat way more than you thought you would be able to, and then also send you home with leftovers in case you get hungry on the way. And yeah, my grandpa was a master at that too, as I mentioned. Actually, let's go back to my embarrassing antics for a bit, because here's something I have to admit I'm not proud of. I included a kitchen scene for the food section, and at first I just added grandma cooking there because grandma cooks, right? It seems like even I, the vocal feminist, have the bias of course it would be a woman cooking, which is very embarrassing. However, I realized my mistake and I added grandpa as well later as a little cutout, so both of them are cooking. It's even more embarrassing for me because my dad is a great cook. I guess these things are just so deeply rooted in me and in all of us that we have to consciously challenge these stereotypes. Otherwise, we won't get rid of them as a society. But that's it for my feminist window. Let's go back to the food. I made a whole spread that looks like a table that is set with all of the staple Czech food you would find at your grandparents'. I tried my best to translate them to English. Some of them don't have an official English name, so I hope it's not too confusing, and I hope the pictures help. I also included a page with a jam recipe, because making jams and compotes is definitely a thing grandparents would do during summer, as you get all of this homegrown fruit that would otherwise be very hard to consume all at once. I asked my dad to give me his recipe for jam, as he makes jams every year, so it actually has the steps he would do, and you can follow it and make jam according to it on your own. And one last thing, foraging. That's a huge thing, especially here in Czechia. It's a national sport to go pick mushrooms in late summer and early fall. Personally, I'm not good at it. I would be very worried that I would pick something that would accidentally kill me. But I definitely did go mushroom picking when I was a child with an adult who knew what they were doing. My uncle and aunt have a cottage that is near the woods, which is where I got the idea for the house of the grandparents to be near the woods. And we would go there and pick mushrooms. I don't know how relatable it is to other nations, because I read somewhere that only Czechs are this big into mushroom picking, but I still had to include it because I feel like it's a significant memory for a lot of Czech kids. I think it's time to address one thing I haven't talked about yet. Why am I drawing all of these pages traditionally? I mean, I did a couple of edits here and there digitally, but the majority of the book is drawn with traditional media. One reason is I'm just so tired of AI. The more it's being pushed down our throats, the more I want to make something tangible. You know, get paint on my fingers, feel the texture of the paper, hear how the marker is gliding over that paper. And making myself do this big project with traditional media meant I got to experience that for a long period of time. And don't get me wrong, I still love digital art very much, but it was nice to have this little something that a robot wouldn't replicate. However, that's not the only reason. You see, I dedicated so much time to this book. I gave it lore. I know the characters. I know how the floorboards creak when you get into the attic. I know the best route from the train station to the grandparents' house. I lived in this world for a while. It felt real to me. So it made sense to use something real while making this. I feel like handmade things carry that feeling of somebody putting all of those feelings and their time into them. Someone cared enough to give it all that attention and to be open to make mistakes and fix them and maybe redo some stuff completely just so that they get the result they imagined. And I guess I wanted the book to show that I didn't make it just because, but because I really deeply cared about it. And that's also the reason why I handwrote all of those texts. I told you I would come back to why I made it so much harder for myself by handwriting this. This is it. You see, I could have used a font. That would definitely make everything much easier. But I wanted it to feel authentic. The problem is that, as I said, the texts that accompany the illustrations are entries from a child's diary. I don't know if you kept a diary as a child. I read through mine to get that authentic feeling, and they feature riveting and life-changing entries like not much happened today. Obviously, your childhood diary entries wouldn't win the Pulitzer Prize or the Nobel Prize or any prize. They probably shouldn't be read by anyone. You don't write in elaborate sentences and don't use vocabulary to impress anyone. You're just writing how you feel in simple language. So I also kept the texts in the book very simple. And at least if I made a mistake in grammar, I could blame it on that. However, you simply cannot have a child's diary with a neat adult handwriting. The letters jump up and down, the spacing is uneven, and you get this shakiness in it. So what was my solution for that? I didn't want to hire a child to write it for me, so I did the next best thing. I tried to mimic it myself. The thing is, I do consider my handwriting quite neat. I worked hard on it, and just pretending that you're writing like a child won't give you that authenticity. So I decided to hold the pen in a way I normally wouldn't. And immediately I got that shakiness, but it was so hard to write like that. But I committed. The thing is that I was set on making 2 language versions of this book. One in Czech, one in English. So whenever I had a text for a page, I had to write it twice. Once in English, once in Czech. Was it worth the wrist pain and the probable carpal tunnel in my future? I don't know. I hope so. I also included bits of grandma's and grandpa's handwriting. So when Anička gets the letter, it's written in a neater cursive that the grandma would use. And then grandpa jotted down his jam recipe in these bolder, all caps letters. I tried to match their handwriting to the personalities I gave them, but all of those are obviously still written by me. I believe the last thing to talk about is the cover. I left the creation of the cover as one of the last steps because I couldn't decide what the best thing to do would be. What would represent this collection of memories the best? And then I came up with a quilt made out of granny squares. The whole book is like a little mosaic, a collection of happy moments from childhood. I wanted the cover to tell you that as soon as you pick it up. It's here to bring you nostalgia, joy, and comfort. And what will give you the same feelings of warmth and comfort? How about a quilt crocheted by grandma? So each of the squares represents one of the memories featured in the book and some extras. And together they make up a quilt that you can wrap yourself in and get lost in all of those memories and find comfort in them. I hope it feels like a warm hug when you flip through this book. Speaking of flipping through it, it is indeed printed now. All of this art is now bound into a book. I got it printed myself because it was my personal project. So it's just a paperback stapled together and even that was really expensive to get. But it's an actual physical book that you can flip through and read, and I'm very proud of it. So if you want to read the whole thing and experience that story and get lost in all those childhood memories, you can get a copy in both English and Czech. It's up in my shop right now. There are more pages that I didn't show in this video. There's a stormy day when the electricity goes out, one where Anička goes through the treasures she found in the attic, where the little family photo is featured. There's an in-depth look at the garden. There are 48 pages in total, 24 spreads. Since I can't ship it physically to every place in the world, especially the USA now due to the tariffs, I also made a digital version of it, so that you also can experience the story if you want to, but cannot get the physical copy. It's in PDF. Links to both the physical and the digital copy are in the description. There's one more thing I want to talk about. And if you plan to read the book and don't want to spoil yourself, you can just leave the video now. Maybe come back to it later. But if you do want to know, I'll tell you now. As I said at the beginning, the idea for the book came from the fact that all of my grandparents are gone now. I could have ended it on a high note and kept the happiness and the magic of the childhood, but that's not real life, is it? So the second to last page or spread is Anička being on the train, waving goodbye to her grandparents with all of the leftovers, with food. Everything is happy and joyful. And then you flip to the last page and this page is here to remind you to spend time with your grandparents if you still can. I tried to show the contrast of the bright, sunny train station with the modernized gray one. Side note, why is the world becoming less colorful in general? Why is everything gray these days? But maybe that's a story for a whole other video. What I wanted to say is that the world is a bit less bright without grandparents. But what no one will take away from you are all those memories your grandparents gave you. I hope watching this video brought back some of that brightness. Thank you for going on that experience with me. I really appreciate that.